The sun gave forth its light without brightness, like the moon, during this whole year. Procopius wrote that sentence in 536 AD. He was a lawyer, a historian, someone trained to describe things precisely, without exaggeration. He wasn't writing poetry. He was trying to warn someone. Nobody listened. And somewhere, right now, buried under the soil of Scandinavia, there is a piece of gold that proves he was telling the truth. By the end of this video, you're going to find out what this is about. But before, you need to understand what Procopius actually lived through, because nothing in the history of the ancient world prepared anyone for what was about to happen. It is early spring, 536 AD. Imagine yourself standing outside your home in the countryside north of Constantinople. The sun rose an hour ago. You know it because the roosters crowed, the birds moved, because the sky changed from black to grey. But something is wrong. There are no shadows. You look down at your feet. The ground is pale and flat. You look up. The sun is there. You can see it, a pale, cold disk sitting behind what looks like frosted glass. It gives light the way a candle gives light through a wall. Present, distant, wrong. Still no shadows. You will not see a shadow for the next 18 months. What Procopius saw in Constantinople, a Syrian patriarch named Michael saw in Antioch. What Michael saw in Antioch, imperial scribes recorded in China. What the scribes recorded in China matches almost word for word what Irish monks were writing in the cold stone rooms of their monasteries along the Atlantic coast. People with no contact with each other, no shared language, no way of knowing the other existed, all of them describing the same sky. The fog. A dense, dry, silvery mist that seemed to come from nowhere and refused to lift had appeared almost overnight. Procopius says it covered Europe, the Middle East, and parts of Asia simultaneously. The Chinese records describe yellow dust falling from the sky. Dust landing on rooftops, coating the streets of cities. In some provinces, summer simply didn't come. In Ireland, the monks wrote 3 words that should be impossible. No bread for 3 years. 3 consecutive harvest failures. In the ancient world, no harvest means the elderly stop eating so the young can survive. It means you slaughter the animals you were planning to breed from. It means you eat next year's seed grain, which means next year's harvest fails before it's even planted. It means that what life used to feel like has completely disappeared. In the ancient Mayan Book of Kings, a scribe left behind one line that cuts through 15 centuries without losing a single gram of its weight. 873 grams of grain could not be purchased for 43 grams of gold. Think about what that sentence means. Gold, the thing empires were built on, the thing men killed each other for, the measure of all value in the ancient world, had become worthless. You could hold a king's ransom in your hand and still starve in the street. For 14 centuries, historians read documents like these and called them exaggeration, too impossible to be taken literally. Then, in the 1990s, a dendrochronologist at Queen's University Belfast named Mike Bailey cut open an ancient Irish oak tree. Tree rings don't lie. Every ring is 1 year. A thin ring means a cold, difficult year, less sunlight, slower growth. Bailey found rings from 536 so thin they were almost invisible. 3 hits, 3 cold years on top of each other, recorded in wood, waiting 15 centuries to be read. But tree rings only tell you something happened. They don't tell you what actually happened. The answer for that question was sitting in a glacier.
In 2013, a team led by Harvard historian Michael McCormick drilled a 72-meter ice core from the Swiss Alps. That cylinder of ice contained over 2,000 years of atmospheric history. Every eruption, every dust storm, every season of human activity, frozen in layers thin enough to read week by week. 2 microscopic shards of volcanic glass from spring 536 were also found in the ice. X-rays identified their chemical signature, Iceland. A massive Icelandic eruption had thrown enough sulfate aerosol into the upper atmosphere to block sunlight across the entire northern hemisphere. The eruption was followed by a second in 540 and a third in 547. 3 eruptions in 11 years. McCormick published his findings in the journal Antiquity in 2018. His conclusion was a single sentence: 536 was the worst year to be alive. 5 years later, it is 541 AD. The port of Pelusium, Egypt. A ship docks. The crew is sick. Within days, something is moving through the port city. It was Yersinia pestis, the same bacterium that would 8 centuries later be called the Black Death. The connection to 536 is not coincidence. 3 years of failed harvests had left immune systems across 3 continents too weak to fight. The cooling had pushed rodent populations out of their native habitats into human settlements, carrying infected fleas with them. The plague reached Constantinople by spring of 542. At its peak, 5,000 people dying every single day in the capital alone. Procopius was there. He describes bodies being loaded onto ships and set on fire in the harbour because the city had run out of places to bury them. Emperor Justinian contracted the disease. He survived. His empire did not. Justinian had spent decades and billions reconstructing the Roman Empire, pushing his armies back into Italy, back into North Africa, back across the Mediterranean coast. He was months from completing a reunification that hadn't existed in a century. The plague ended that permanently. What happened next is where the scale becomes genuinely difficult to absorb. You know the phrase Dark Ages. You were probably taught it described a vague cultural decline after Rome fell, a loss of learning, a general dimming. It was not vague. It had a cause, it had a start date, and it struck everywhere at once. In Mexico, the city of Teotihuacan had a population of 125,000, larger than any city in Europe at the time. Its Pyramid of the Sun was one of the great architectural achievements of the ancient world. Around 550 AD, its own residents burned the temples along the Avenue of the Dead. Archaeologists have found evidence of severe child malnutrition in the skeletal record from this period. The volcanic winter had brought drought. The crops had failed. The people had prayed to the gods their rulers were supposed to represent. The gods had not answered, so the people burned the temples down. In Scandinavia, population estimates suggest losses of up to 50%. Entire settlements were abandoned. Communities that had existed for generations simply disappeared. In Peru, the Mochi civilization, sophisticated farmers and fishermen with advanced irrigation systems, collapsed as the climate swung between extremes it had never seen before. Their fields flooded, their fish vanished, and their infrastructure failed. The Gupta Empire weakened. The Sassanid Empire fractured. The Avars began migrating westward. On every inhabited continent, the same pattern: famine, then migration, then war, then collapse. Simultaneously. A global civilizational reset triggered by volcanic ash and sustained by plague. All of it lasted for about 124 years. Researchers didn't even give it a name until 2016, the Late Antique Little Ice Age. A 124-year catastrophe confirmed by glaciology, dendrochronology, and archaeology, with no name until 10 years ago. The year is 1999. Morten Axboe, a Danish researcher, published a paper studying gold hoards from migration period Scandinavia. Across Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, archaeologists had been finding deposits of gold, large collections, buried deliberately, in locations that made no sense for safekeeping. No markers, no indicators of intended retrieval. Axboe connected the timing of these deposits to 536. His conclusion? The gold wasn't hidden, it was offered. An entire ruling class across an entire region independently reaching the same desperate conclusion: that the sun was dying, that the gods had abandoned them, that the only remaining option was to give everything they had, the most valuable thing they possessed, back to the earth, and pray. When archaeologists find those gold hoards, they are not finding treasure, they are finding prayers. The ice core from the Swiss Alps, the same core that confirmed the Icelandic eruption, also contains a chemical record of economic activity. Lead is a byproduct of silver mining. When mining stops, lead vanishes from the atmosphere. After 536, lead in the ice drops to almost zero. It doesn't return for 100 years. 100 years of economic silence, measured not in texts, not in archaeology, but in the chemistry of alpine ice. And when the lead finally returns, it marks the beginning of the medieval silver economy, the one that funded the cathedrals, the one that built the kingdoms, the one that became modern Europe. The world that came after 536 was not a continuation of the world that came before. It was a replacement. Procopius wrote his sentence in a city where 5,000 people were dying every day, where the sun had not cast a shadow in years, where the empire he had spent his life documenting was coming apart in real time. In 536 AD, he indeed wasn't writing poetry. He was writing down the end of the ancient world. And he was right. If this is the kind of history you want more of, history that happened, that mattered, that left marks you can still find if you know where to look, subscribe to the channel. The next video goes somewhere you haven't been yet.